Over the past 50 years, societal norms and trends have shifted significantly. In the 1970s, smoking was widespread and accepted in public places, but today it's largely restricted due to health concerns. Gender roles have evolved, with more women entering the workforce while men share the domestic duties. The rise of technology has transformed communication, moving from face-to-face interaction to digital connections via social media and smartphones. Environmental awareness has increased, making sustainable practices more common. And fashion trends have also evolved, with styles from the 1970s making the occasional comeback. Recreational activities have diversified, reflecting a more broad acceptance of varied hobbies and lifestyles. Today, we'll have a look at cool things from the 70s that are no longer acceptable. But before we get started, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so that we can relive these memories together in the future. Number 10. Kid chemistry sets. Let's begin with one that we do have around today, but they were much more hazardous during the 1970s. I'm talking about kid chemistry sets. These were exactly what you're thinking they were, a method used by many children to get into science at a young age and help them to understand some of the basic properties in chemistry. On the surface, that is a great thing to have, but in the 1970s they had chemicals in them that weren't exactly child-friendly. Things like copper sulfate and iodine, and they were given actual Bunsen burners to do experiments. And today, that's what we call a fire hazard. Thankfully, these have been improved so that only non-hazardous chemicals are included. And science is still important to teach children, but they don't have to have access to the dangerous stuff at such a young age. Number 9. Car surfing. Now, you may remember a key movie or two set in the 1970s that featured people doing car surfing, and it's a miracle that more people weren't injured doing this dangerous activity. As the name would suggest, the act of car surfing is simply getting on the roof of a car and allowing your friend to drive while you act like you're surfing the waves. And believe it or not, you can stay easily balanced on a vehicle's roof as it goes around. But because it's a car, things can also be dangerous quickly. For example, what if that driver had to pump the brakes or make a sudden turn or swerve to get out of the way of something? The person on top may have a much different ride. People actually lost their lives doing this action, and many more were injured, and today it's been banned in most of the United States. Number 8. Flame retardants. For me, this one is rather iconic because it was a process that was done to keep people safe, and yet it hurt people in different ways. Flame retardants were used to keep things from being set on fire, and by the 1970s, electronic devices were all over the common home, meaning there was always a chance that a fire could happen, spread to other rooms, and potentially burn the entire place down. Flame retardants were meant to keep certain things from catching ablaze, thus minimizing the risk of losing the entire home. But the problem is that the chemicals in those were toxic, and many people did not wear masks when spraying them on things. So, while they may have been keeping homes safe, people were not keeping themselves safe, and so flame retardants were banned in 1977. Number 7. Steel playground equipment. Now, I'm sure that many of you have memories of this kind of thing. Sometimes people don't realize that a certain material may be the wrong thing to use until injuries happen and complaints begin to roll in. In today's world, plastic and wooden playground equipment is the norm, and for good reason. While there are some steel playground equipment still around, it's much less than it was in the 1970s because children kept getting injured. Steel is metal, and that means it can be heated up on a hot summer day, burning the children that are playing on it. Plus, if that metal is not perfectly smooth, it could cause all kinds of markings on the body because a child couldn't safely slide down. Number 6. Riding in the trunk. In the 1970s, it was a common practice for someone to ride in the trunk of a car. It really depended on the family or friends. Perhaps the child really wanted to do it, or they needed the seats for something else. Maybe you had a large amount of people to fit into the car and someone needed to go in the trunk because there was room. And you may have even tried to sneak them into a drive-in movie. Whatever the case may have been for riding in the trunk, it was a dangerous activity and it became outlawed. And today, it's banned in most places. Number 5. Not wearing a seatbelt. Do I really have to explain why this one is so dangerous? It was actually not until the 1960s that seatbelts became mandatory in every vehicle. However, just because you had one did not mean you were required to wear it. Many families, especially those with children, would neglect to put on their seatbelt because it was too restrictive and thus limited what they could do in the vehicle. Now obviously, there are much more strict seatbelt laws today, and if you don't have yours on when a police car sees you, you're going to get a ticket and a fine, especially if it involves a child. Seatbelts do save lives, so you should never let yourself, your friends, or your family not have one on while in the car. You may regret enforcing it later. Number 4. Lead paint. Whether you believe it or not, the 1970s was both famous and infamous for the use of lead paint. To be fair, there is a good reason that lead paint was made, including making paint that dried faster, resisted corrosion, and even more. But because this paint also featured lead, that meant that it was toxic, and people started to get sick from it. By 1978, the use of lead paint was banned in the United States, and then eventually in the United Kingdom. Sadly though, places like China and other countries are still using lead paint today, which has led to some controversies when it comes to products and toys. Number 3. Tire swings. Tire swings are part of some iconic images of previous versions of America. They were a simple and yet fun way to enjoy a summer day, and many of us have likely played on them in decades past. However, tire swings could also be quite dangerous, and perhaps not for the reasons you may think. Many tire swings were often made of real tires, which meant that the rubber they were constructed from was harmful to the environment if left there. They could even help to bring insect infestations, and if the tire was heavy enough, it could cause the branch it was attached to break when a child got onto it. And so, the use of real tires in tire swings has slowly faded away. Number 2. Drinking from the fire hose. And now for an iconic one that most of us did on a hot summer day. You're out having fun with your friends in the backyard, perhaps playing wiffle ball or frisbee, and you need a drink of water. You don't want to go inside to get it because that will take you away from the action, and so you get out the hose and drink from that. It does seem like a harmless action, but you all know better by now. As time has gone on, especially in the 70s, that water was found to be not as pure as we all believed. And if you touched the hose, which was likely on the ground, as you drank, you could have accidentally gotten extra chemicals, animal byproducts, or anything else in your mouth when you drank. And so over time, drinking from the water hose is something that has faded into the past. Number 1. Lawn darts. Now I'm going to end this list with an actual toy that was used by children for over a decade until it was finally banned in the 1980s. Lawn darts. These were toys that were meant to be part of an outdoor game. Basically, you would try to throw the darts into a ring that would lay across various parts of the lawn. The game was all about accuracy, and we still have darts today, just not on the lawn. One of the biggest issues with these darts was that they weighed a couple of pounds, and much heavier than the darts we have in bars and such. It was often an issue that children would take these heavy darts and throw them around without a care in the world. Children actually ended up losing their life because of these darts, so naturally, they were eventually banned in the 1980s. And there you have it, a look at some things from the 1970s that aren't exactly acceptable these days, and you'll hopefully agree it's all for a good reason. Were you shocked at some of the items that were commonplace in the 1970s? And which ones do you remember the best? Perhaps you're glad about them not being around anymore. As always, you should comment down below with your thoughts and anything else from the 70s that you know is not exactly acceptable these days. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.